The steel factory floor hummed with a steady familiar rhythm, their boots clicking against steel platforms, their gloved hands guiding machinery that weighed more than their own lives. Among them walked a man who rarely drew attention. Yet anyone who observed long enough sensed something different about him. He was Fad Khan, 25 years old, born and raised in Gujranwala, Pakistan. Humble origins, simple dreams, and a heart shaped by hard work. Fad wasn't the loudest worker, nor was he the type to show off strength or skills. Instead, he carried an unusual calmness, an inner discipline that made him reliable, quiet, and deeply respected by the older workers. Every morning, before the machines roared to full speed, Fad whispered to himself the same advice his mother had given him the night he left Pakistan. "Where you earn your bread, keep your heart clean." These words lived inside him like a compass. His posture was straight but unassuming. His face held the innocence of someone uncorrupted by greed. And though the work was exhausting physically and mentally, he never complained. If the bell jammed, he fixed it. If an older worker needed help lifting heavy sheets, he was the first to step forward. Even the harsh supervisors found little to criticize in him. That morning, however, felt slightly different. There was a quiet buzz of anticipation moving through the factory floor. Workers exchanged glances, surprisingly energetic despite the cold. Something or someone was coming. The large doors at the far end slid open with a hydraulic hiss, and the atmosphere shifted instantly. Walking inside was Kyung-mi, the 30-year-old CEO of the Steel Corporation, smart, graceful, highly respected. A woman whose presence alone could make supervisors stand straighter and workers lower their voices. She was beautiful in a soft, effortless way. Shoulder-length black hair, a warm expression, and a confidence that came from intelligence rather than arrogance. She rarely visited the factory floor in person, so her appearance felt like an event. The workers lined up as she passed, offering small bows. She greeted each group with a relaxed smile, making them feel seen, something very few CEOs took time to do. Fad, standing near the back, lowered his gaze respectfully. He was never comfortable around authority figures, especially someone as influential as her. Kyunju walked to the center platform and clapped her hands lightly. "Good morning, everyone. I have a surprise today." The workers murmured excitedly. "Today is my birthday," she announced with a playful grin. "And I want to celebrate it with the people who work the hardest in this company. You." A ripple of joy moved across the hall. "So tonight," she continued, "I'm taking the entire team out for dinner. All shifts, all departments." Applause erupted. Not forced. Not formal but genuinely happy. Even Fad allowed himself a small smile, something rare for him. Mi's eyes moved over the crowd, and for a brief second, they landed on Fad. She noticed the quiet young man who stood straighter than others, who seemed serious yet sincere. She didn't know his name yet, but something about him caught her attention. She gave a nod of acknowledgement. Fad felt his heartbeat quicken for reasons he didn't understand. The day continued, but fate was already aligning itself. Unseen dangers were waiting. One unexpected moment was about to shatter the calm of the factory floor and change two lives forever. The cheerful atmosphere inside the steel factory did not last long. What began as a day of celebration quietly shifted into a scene of looming danger. The factory floor, normally filled with predictable mechanical rhythms, suddenly felt uneasy, like something in the air was waiting to snap. Workers resumed their tasks after the CEO's announcement, smiling, whispering about dinner plans, patting each other on the back. The large crane suspended overhead hummed steadily, carrying enormous steel frames from one station to another. Everything looked normal. Everything sounded normal, but something was not right. Fad, standing near the conveyor line, noticed a slight tremor in one of the overhead rails. It was subtle. So subtle that no one else seemed to notice. He narrowed his eyes, watching the heavy steel frame hanging above a group of workers. The chain holding it swayed a little too loosely. The bolt on the side looked strained under the weight. Thad felt the kind of instinct that only people who work closely with machines develop, a quiet warning rising inside him. He took a step forward, ready to alert someone. But before he could shout, the entire factory echoed with a thunderous metallic roar. A deafening thirst shook the entire hall. Gasps, screams, frantic footsteps. Every sound collided into chaos. The enormous steel frame slipped from its mount and came crashing down toward the exact area where Kyunji stood, observing the welding process. The floor vibrated violently as the frame struck, its sheer weight creating a shockwave of dust and noise. Workers froze in horror, watching the CEO stumble backward, her scream piercing through the air as the steel corner smashed onto her leg. She collapsed, clutching her thigh, her face twisting in unbearable pain. For a moment, everyone stood in disbelief. The CEO, the woman who owned the factory, who moments ago had promised them a celebratory dinner, was lying helplessly under a fallen structure. Supervisors shouted for help, others ran in panic, and a few tried to lift the steel, but it was far too heavy. The scene was spiraling into fear and confusion, the kind that makes every second feel like an eternity. Fahad did not hesitate. His instincts took over. He sprinted across the factory floor, weaving through scattered tools and panicking workers. His heart pounded not from fear for himself, but from urgency. An urgency he didn't recognize until now. Reaching the fallen frame, he dropped to his knees and pushed his hands under the steel edge. Others shouted at him, "Don't. It's too heavy, you'll injure yourself. Wait for the crane." But Thad wasn't listening. Strength fueled by pure determination coursed through him. He pressed his feet against the floor, exhaled deeply, and with a guttural force he didn't know he possessed, he managed to shift the steel frame just enough for two other workers to pull leg out from under it. She cried out, a high sharp sound that cut straight through him. Her face had turned pale, sweat collecting on her forehead, and her breath came in painful bursts. Fahad knelt beside her, supporting her shoulders as she trembled. "Stay awake," he urged softly, his voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding his veins. "You're going to be okay. Don't close your eyes." Her eyelids fluttered weakly, her hands shaking as she tried to grip his arm. For the first time their eyes met. Not the polite glance from earlier, but a gaze filled with fear, desperation, and trust. The factory alarms blared overhead, signaling an emergency. Workers surrounded them, some shouting instructions, others calling for medical assistance. Within minutes, that felt like hours, the ambulance arrived with loud sirens and flashing lights. Paramedics rushed in, secured her leg, and placed her on a stretcher. As they wheeled her out, her hand briefly tightened around Thad's wrist. Silent gratitude mixed with terror. Thad stood frozen, breathing heavily, his clothes covered in dust and grease. He had saved her from something that could have ended her life. What he didn't know yet was that this single act of courage had bound their fates together in ways neither could imagine. The ambulance sped through the busy streets, its sirens slicing through the cold air, as if urging the world to move aside. Inside, the atmosphere was tense and urgent. Hyunji lay on a stretcher, her leg tightly strapped, her breathing uneven. Every bump of the road made her wheeze, sending new waves of pain through her body. The paramedics worked quickly, checking her pulse, adjusting her oxygen mask, securing her leg to prevent further damage. But despite their calm professionalism, fear flickered in their eyes. The injury looked serious. Fahad sat in the corner of the ambulance, knees pressed together, hands clenched, sweat dripping down his neck. Even though the air was cold, he wasn't supposed to be there. Workers were never taken along. But when Kyunji had weakly whispered, "Don't leave," the paramedics understood immediately. Something about the way she held his wrist made it clear she needed his presence more than anyone else at that moment. So Thad stayed silent and worried, his eyes fixed on her pale face. The doors burst open as they reached the hospital. Doctors and nurses rushed out, lifting her stretcher and wheeling her down the brightly lit hallways. Thad followed at a distance, unsure where to stand or whom to talk to. Everything around him felt too white, too clean, too sharp. Back in Pakistan, he had been to hospitals, small government clinics crowded with people, noisy corridors, and a smell of antiseptic mixed with dust. But this was different here. Everything moved with urgent precision. The doctors gathered around her as she was taken in for examination. X-rays were ordered immediately. Nurses spoke rapidly, their Korean too fast for Fahad to understand. He watched helplessly from behind the glass partition.